I'm really very happy with barley wood, but here at the garden house in Buckland Monacorum, I do feel the slightest pang of jealousy. This is a northwest facing valley on the edge of Dartmoor in Devon. It was once the home of Lionel Fortescue, a retired Eton schoolmaster. But since 1981, the garden has been managed by Keith Wiley, a great plantsman and innovator. And what was once a traditional formal garden has been dragged into the 21st century.
There was a 2-acre wall garden here when we came, and there was 2 of us looking after it. It's about the same size as Sissinghurst, but with considerably less staff looking after it.
You've got your work cut out when there's only 2 of you.
Absolutely, yeah. So we couldn't worry too much about keeping it absolutely perfect, you know. I mean, we had to have a sort of rather more laid-back attitude towards it.
Well, you can have a laid-back attitude in a Devon valley. What strikes you about it is the lushness of it. How much rainfall here?
Oh, well, we get 60 inches of rain.
So that's more than twice the national average.
Absolutely,
then.
yeah, and it's sort of spread right throughout the year. North slope as well means it's quite cool. We grow things that like sort of moisture really well down in here, but anything that likes sun was a bit of a struggle.
You came here and have made such a difference. Did you intend to develop the garden when you arrived?
Well, Mr. Fortescue came with the intention of creating the best garden in England, and he created an absolute jewel in the wall garden down here. But I've always eyed enviously the sort of land around. It's in a beautiful setting, the garden house. It's in a wonderful, unspoilt Devon landscape. And I've always been eyeing that, I think, from the moment I came.
What makes the garden house at Buckland Monacorum special?
Well, I think it is the blending of the old and the new. I mean, we do have this wonderful old romantic wall garden. I mean, it's beautiful. And then you've got the new, and there's sort of the completely different style that's sort of evolved since.
Keith has developed a very loose, romantic style of planting that he's adapted for the Devon climate. So we've got a South African area, an American prairie and a Cretan meadow, great swathes of wild flowers that just sweep off into the distance. Stephen Lacey has been visiting the garden for the last 12 months to see how it evolves with the seasons. So first we take a step back to spring.
So how have you approached the planting over here, Keith?
Well, initially it started because I kept seeing plants in the wild and thinking that they bear no resemblance to the way that we grow them in gardens. For example, this piece here was based on a Dorset heath. You know, the way that the paths wind around on the Dorset heaths like some drunken sheep has made them, no rhyme or reason. And I thought it would be nice to sort of romanticise it a little bit further, and instead of just using heaths, to use dwarf rhododendrons and azaleas, and they form this wonderful close blue and green tapestry, out of which comes this group of Cornus controversa variegata, like some sort of little fairy glade.
It's going to be fantastic when it grows up.
It's going to be amazing, yeah.
So the starting point is sort of being inspired by nature, bringing it back and taking it on.
Absolutely, yeah, romanticising the idea a little bit further. I keep seeing it around the world, these wonderful landscapes, lovely combinations of plants, and thought how nice it would be. Instead of, some people come back with postcards from their holiday, I come back with an idea for making another piece of garden. There's just so many ideas that you can learn from nature. For example, here at the far end of the long walk, there's this group of birches. I mean, up on the moor, I noticed that they were growing not as single stems, but as multi-trunked ones. So I bought these birches, planted them close together. They were about 18 inches high, and I cut them down to about 6 inches, which is a bit of an act of faith when they cost you £7.50 each. But the beauty is, as they grow, it's going to form this wonderfully natural-looking group, right? Some of the trunks will be thick, some of the trunks thin. It's all a variety called Bachelor Ermini Greyswood, one of the Himalayan birches.
So we're always conditioned to strive for the perfect specimen tree with a straight trunk.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for example, here on the right, look, I mean, I planted that birch Bachelor nigra on an angle. And over on the left, a group of Acer, the paperbark maple, Acer grycium. I mean, it seemed to me if you want one trunk, why not have 10?
So you planted as a thicket.
Absolutely.
And these quirky natural shapes just bring in so much more character into the garden, don't they?
Well, they do. This one was inspired by the hazel coppices that I'd seen over in Kent. But instead of using hazel, I thought it would be nice to do it with magnolias. I mean, granted, a single magnolia is lovely, but there's about 25 of them in here. And they've got just such beautiful trunks. And as they grow, they'll produce this wonderful sort of crisscrossing trunks and then undercarpeted completely with spring flowering bulbs, which love the conditions.
And here you've done a similar thing under azaleas.
Yeah, well, I think we waste an awful lot of space under our shrubs, really. I mean, if you think about it, if you're a plantaholic like me, you'll actually like to get as much value out of any given space as you can.
There's some lovely things. That's the dentaria under there, isn't it?
The dentaria is looking nice, and the white pachyphragma is looking nice.
And the pulmonaria is the big splash of blue.
And the pulmonaria, yeah, at the back there. It's looking smashing. But it was also the idea then that we had fritillaries that were looking, there was an area of fritillaries that was looking absolutely wonderful with celandines and wood anemones. And I thought, since that was working so well, why not have it on a big scale, you know, lots of it. If you've got something good, go for it big time.
It's an absolute spectacle, Keith. It really is. What you've done is carry the bulbs out from under the trees and shrubs to cover this whole bank.
The idea came from going up onto if you like, coming out of the tree zone on a mountain in the Alps or somewhere like that and coming into the sort of snowmelt meadows. And I've never been there, but I thought it was a wonderful idea to sort of fill the place with bulbs here.
You can see some of the plants starting to seed away merrily already.
Yeah, well, it's when the seeding starts to really get going that you'll really get the sort of magical natural effect.
There's quite a mix of the sort of bulbocodium daffodils down there, the petticoats.
And the Erythronium revolutum in behind. But you can see how many different things are in here.
Now, how have you actually made up this bank? What are they growing in?
It was actually all full of tree roots, completely riddled with tree roots. So I had to make the beds up with a sort of sandy, peaty compass. And that's perfect for the bulbs to self-seed in, which helps as well.
And do you colour coordinate them?
Well, the only time I can plant it is when it's in full flower, because there's so many plants in here. So they're grown in pots and I just sort of work them in amongst it. I'm always working on it at this time of the year, really. When you get a spectacle like this in the spring, I mean, this is what it's about for me. It's like enhanced, romanticised nature.
One thing that becomes evident as you wander around the garden here is that it is most definitely a garden for all seasons. Great areas devoted to spring bulbs, others to autumn colour. But it must be at this time of year, in early summer, when there's the greatest explosion of colour from the poppies, Californian and English, and all manner of wildflowers stitched into the garden. But of course, this garden began in a small walled area in a much more traditional manner.
You've certainly caught this garden the right moment, Keith.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
Absolutely spot on, yeah.
When was this originally planted up?
Well, Mr. Fortescue started in 1946. There was obviously a very old garden around a sort of 16th century vicarage in here, which is the tower that you've got there.
Yeah.
Because it was the vegetable garden around the old ruins of the vicarage, they limed it for centuries, so he couldn't grow rhododendrons, azaleas here, and he had to grow herbaceous plants, and that's why it's always been a mass of herbaceous plants, particularly at this time of the year.
Has it changed much over all these years?
Well, I suppose Mr. Fortescue planted it in the sort of traditional way of it, plants in blocks, you know, companioned in a block alongside another block. And it has changed. I mean, the filipendulas have started to grow through each other and the campanulas have self-seeded and the geraniums have done the same thing. So it's much more informal now than it was, really.
So not much weeding required here?
Well, not at this time of the year, once the plants have actually all sort of grown over and filled in.
It's amazing full effect, isn't it? What's this, one of the Galligas?
This is the Gallagher Lady Wilson's beautiful colour
Super,
combination in with the campanula and philopendula in here, isn't it?
It's a wonderful pink philopendula.
The meadow sweet over there, it's beautiful, fluffy pink flowers. It's a bit of a thug, actually, because it sort of runs around a little bit, but, I mean, what a thug. Needs a slightly moisture-retentive soil, and a cool spot, which is what we have down here.
And all this area outside the walls, of course, is completely new since Fortescue's day.
Well, brand new. I mean, 7 years ago, there were cows grazing on a gently sloping field out here.
So you haven't felt constrained at all that you should keep the garden in Fortescue's style, as it
Keeping
were?
the spirit of Fortescue with the ideas of colours and his taste and things. But no, I mean, Mr. Fortescue was the first person to be changing. When I came here 22 years ago, he was always asking me what we should be planting.
Presumably your training was in the more traditional formal gardening. How do you progress from that to this very naturalistic style?
It coincided with going to see plants in the wild, and you kept seeing all the time you were being confronted by this completely different range of way plants were growing, the density, the diversity. So seeing plants in the wild at the same time as actually having a chance, a blank piece of canvas out here, I suppose it was the combination of the both meant that a completely new style of gardening started to evolve, really.
What about this one here?
This one was inspired by Crete. I mean, we went to Crete just at the same time as we were starting to take this field in.
Well, this is what gardening's all about, Keith, isn't it?
This is, you need your shades in this one, Stephen, don't you, really?
And the inspiration here was South Africa, was it?
Yeah, I went to South Africa and saw the plants growing in South Africa, and somebody said to me before I went, why is it that the flowers in South Africa flower for just a short time, and yet in England the same ones flower all summer long? And the answer lies because they grow in pure sand down there, and they've just got enough energy to get out the ground before the sun burns them up for the summer. So what I did is put compost underneath and then sand on top, and the plants can think that they're in England in their roots and South Africa in their tops. And it does flower for all summer long, really, so it does actually work.
And of course many of these are just quite familiar bedding plants for us.
They are, yeah, things like the brachycomie, which, you know, we grow in our containers, and the Sophinia. I mean, the Sophinia million bells, I mean, so often you see it growing in hanging baskets, we think it's its natural habitat. I mean, it's got to grow in the wild somewhere, and it does grow in sandy places in the wild. And also the tagetes. I mean, they just look wonderful in this jumbled up mix all together here. So it is mostly annuals in this, and there's these that I bed out and those that self-seed.
So what was the starting point here? You moulded the ground, did you?
Yeah, so when it's not in flower, I try to make it want to look like a sort of sculpture in sand. So earlier in the season, it's just the shape of the dunes, which at certain times, almost mimicking, you know, that idea of the flowering of a desert, you know, the magical flowering of a desert. It's almost trying to capture that.
And then what about the maintenance at the end of the year?
It would just get cleaned off so that the seeds that are fallen have a chance to germinate in the winter if they want to, so that it stays nice and clean all through the winter.
But not all the plants are from South Africa, are they?
Just trying to create a South African feel. I mean, after all, most of the plants from South Africa won't grow in Devon. So similar plants from like climatic zones like California, for example, like the Californian poppies. There's a lot of Californians around.
Wonderful range of colours, and there's really rich burnt orange down there.
And they go also over into the sort of pale yellow, sort of dwarfish Schultzia lobi, which gives this lovely sort of pale yellow movement and drifts of colour through the rest of the scheme here. Annuals are such wonderful plants, but we got so used to growing them in sort of staid old sort of usages. Why not let them go?
Now, I wouldn't normally chop the tops off Campanula lactiflora just before it flowers, but Keith likes to take some of them down to prevent them from flopping over when they get top heavy in the wind. So he takes them down to varying heights in order to stagger the flowering, because this is going to send up new shoots with new flowers on, and this particular one will probably flower in about August. And some of them he takes right down almost to the ground much earlier in the year, so they'll be nice sturdy plants and there'll be no need to stake them. It still feels a bit weird though, cutting off all these buds, look. Mind you, he was quite right. This is a clump he did about 3 weeks ago. You can see where he cut the stems off, And look at all this lush new growth. It's compact. I think it's a really good idea. I'm going to try it at home. At the garden house, there's always more than one way of doing things, and this honeysuckle is a good illustration of that. This one is called Sweet Sue, and it's perfect just for allowing to become this sort of tumbling mound down this little bank. So you've got all the colour, you've got all the scent, and it's really accessible right in front of you. And he just keeps it tidy by taking off any of these long shoots that come out during the flowering season and just snipping them out just towards the base. But earlier in the season, you can actually just take the shears to it and take the whole top off, and that's going to keep it nice and compact and tight. And anyway, who needs trellis?
It's early autumn at the garden house in Devon, and here in the walled garden, Cornuscusa chinensis is dripping with its strawberry-like fruits. This is the traditional way of displaying plants, as single specimens in rectangular borders. But in other parts of the garden, Keith has been experimenting with a looser look, which comes from observing how plants grow and blend together in the wild. Repetition, of course, is quite important, isn't it, to get this sort of natural feel? It sort of settles the garden down a bit, doesn't it?
Self-seeding allows you to do it. Plants will pop themselves all the way through the scheme, and it never plant them in this way. It's just the way they've appeared, really.
Yeah, well, last time we were here, of course, this was a mass of colour in July. Now it's seed heads.
Same plants, just gone on into seed later on. I think there's beauty in these seed heads of their own right. Some people think it looks an absolute mess, but I think it looks absolutely lovely at the moment, really.
How long are you going to leave it before cutting it all
It will
down?
now selectively start to get cut down to allow the winter seeders time to germinate and room to grow, really.
Some nice repetition here again, Keith, with the heathers and the verbena.
Well, verbena's a wonderful plant, Steve. I mean, it flowers for months. And
Deep into the autumn, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the butterflies love it. And it doesn't take up very much space either. It just sort of self-seeds everywhere and lightens everything up. This piece was inspired by the Lizard Peninsula down in Cornwall, where the heathers grow there, and they grow with gorse and grasses. But instead of gorse, I use berberis, and instead of grasses, I've used dioramas. And you end up with this much more natural feel to it.
So, as elsewhere in the garden, you've sort of got your inspiration from the wild, but you've given it this sort of ornamental spin.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you take the original idea from nature, and then you sort of romanticise it a bit further with garden plants.
Asters just starting to come into flower there, Keith.
Yeah, well, you know what happens with Michaelmas daisies normally? I mean, they grow about 6 foot high and flop open. What I did with these was about 6 weeks ago, just as they were starting to show flowers, chop them in half, in fact, and shake them up. And the beauty about that is, of course, they don't need staking then, and they sort of form sort of token bushes that get covered in flower at this time of the year.
Good idea. It takes a bit of nerve.
Well, yeah, first time it did.
Here's in your South African meadow again now, still sparkling with hot colour, the
Still got-
remnants.
Yeah, it would be better if we'd had more sun at this time of the year, but it's nice to see it today anyway. And then over there, that honeysuckle, that Lonicera Sweet Sue. We get so used to them being climbers, but this one I treated as a shrub, and I actually run the hedge trimmer over it occasionally just to round it up. Beautiful variety. This is the bulb meadow, which in the spring is an absolute mass of flowers. I mean, here in early autumn, we've got a smattering of late flowers like the colchicums and the cyclamen and the crocus.
What is the crocus?
Crocus is one called Crocus venaticus. There's lots of different autumn crocus. This one's slightly earlier.
I
Beautiful
don't know this
colour.
one at all.
It's good, it's lovely. It self-seeds around as well. When I took out a Leyland's hedge in front of these Thuya conifers, I thought these lovely trunks reminded me of the conifers in the Rockies. You know, the way they soar skywards. And I thought it would be nice to make a sort of prairie garden underneath with grasses as the main theme. I know the prairies are flat, but this is where the prairies meets the Rockies, you know, the foothills of the Rockies. And underneath and between the grasses, you put these species Michaelmas daisies to give this wonderful sort of dreamy wash of colour.
Quite a wild look, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the sort of wildest effect that we've actually sort of done so far, really. Very much back to nature, this one.
You're not just using American plants.
No, I mean, it's these Chinese grants, it's Miscanthus sinensis, there's the silver feather, and then the red Malapartus. And this Solinum tenuifolium here comes from China as well.
And I can see a whole new area here ready to expand into.
Yeah, I've moved thousands of tons of soil down here. We've completely reshaped the valley. This is going to be a 2-acre water garden to die for down here.
So the adventure carries on.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Can't wait.
They always tell you, don't they, in garden design, make sure you've got lots of little surprises around corners.
Yeah.
You take it to extremes here. You come through oxeye daisies in a real kind of wild and woolly bit to this wonderful carpet of thyme growing over sort of shale.
Well, I always say it's a bit like bluebell is lovely, but it's the wood of bluebells which is totally memorable. So if you're going to have thyme big time, you know.
And you've got the small dwarf one that really hugs the ground here, so it doesn't come up too high.
That's the trimming of it, really. I think that's the secret with it. Every year it's got to be trimmed right to the ground, and we really give it a real haircut when it's finished. Well, as soon as it's finished flowering, it gets a real haircut. Looks pretty ropey for a while, but it comes back. You can see every year, and that's what keeps it tight and compact.
It seems to me, having gone around this garden now, Keith, I mean, talk about eye-opening, that's an understatement, but there's very much a feel of a new kind of gardening happening here.
We're on the verge of a really exciting period where I think the more natural approach is coming in. There's people all over the world just doing little bits of it. Ordinary people respond to this style of gardening, and it's great. You know, they just come in and they think, this is what I could do in my garden, and they go away and try a bit.
So instead of getting your ideas from some dry old book of a garden designer who was operating a century ago, get out and look in the wild, because that's where it's happening now.
You will never look at plants the same again if you see them in the wild. There are myriads of ideas out there. If only we just open our eyes to the possibilities. We'll all interpret what we see in the wild in a slightly different way. That's the exciting time, when those interpretations come in and they start feeding off each other. Very, very exciting time.
Chris Packham goes rock pooling in half an hour in the first of a Nature's Calendar double bill. Next, Chris Beardshaw and Rachel de Thame are on a dahlia growing mission in more Gardener's World.